Hey everyone, today I am going to be interviewing a dear friend of mine, Dan Lowe, and he's going to be talking about his experiences living in Japan and how he's utilizing that in his everyday life back here in Boston.
Thank you so much, Monica. Thank you everyone for watching. So, I first became interested in Japan in third grade social studies. So, I remember we had 3 social studies units that year. It was ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, and modern Japan. I don't know how that fit together, but Boston has this unique relationship with Japan, specifically Kyoto, their sister cities.
Oh, wow, okay.
So, like, the MFA, the Children's Museum, just has a whole lot of Japanese stuff.
Oh, wow.
So, and Massachusetts has a sister state relationship with Hokkaido. So, what I liked about Japan so much was it was just so different from my day to day.
Right.
My uncle lived in Taiwan, so I was, like, exposed to Chinese characters early on, and my stepfather's Filipino. So, like, I've always had this very broad influence related to Asia on a very broad, one would say superficial level, but that made it like attractive as something to study. I'd studied Japanese for only a year. Before going. I did a year at Loyola University New Orleans, which is where I did my bachelor's, and then I did actually Harvard Summer School.
Oh, cool.
Which was basically a repeat, plus it was about twice as much material that I did in my first year. It was the same textbook, so it was easy to track.
Got it.
In 8 weeks.
Wow.
So it was super, super intense, but that made me a little bit overconfident maybe when I went, and I just realized how much I just didn't know.
Oh my God.
That's part of the process.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's great. And so were all your classes there when you were studying there in Japanese, or were you taking kind of like a hybrid?
It was a hybrid.
Okay.
So fortunately I was able to get credit when I went, which meant I was taking Japanese class every day in addition to just like random core classes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, cool. Okay, so you finished your year. Did you come back to the United States, or did you decide to stay?
I thought about transferring. Yes. Yes, indeed. But I decided, you know what, just go back for a year, graduate. And that's when I decided to apply for the JET program, which is the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program.
So that's a really interesting point that you brought up in terms of just like finding pathways to work in Japan. So a few of my past episodes were talking about like different nomad visas, and these are becoming quite popular. Obviously with COVID right now, I would say all of Asia is closed, but prior to, and maybe looking down the road in the future, would you describe Japan as being a pretty open economy for foreigners to work?
There's many visas available to live in Japan, but a lot of them have restrictions. For example, they've added an entrepreneur visa.
Oh, okay.
But it's only 1 year at a time.
Yep.
You need your own office with its own entrance, so something like a WeWork wouldn't cut it. Yeah,
okay.
So, but something very common is there's different. So, for example, I had a 5-year visa on JET. If
5 years.
If I quit after 2 years and wanted to work for another company in the education industry, that would have been fine. But to work for like do like HR in a company or something like that, I would have had to change like to a different category.
So you were basically working through the JET program the full time that you were there, or did you actually find other ways to stay in Japan through other visa types?
Yeah, so actually after JET, I did a 1 semester, I built basically it's Waseda University has a Japanese language program with tons of different classes, all in Japanese. So I sort of built my own pseudo business Japanese major. It wasn't a major, it wasn't a specialization, but I just like piled up those classes.
Oh, wow.
And while I was doing that, I was living in Tokyo and I was applying to jobs. And I had 2 offers to stay in Japan.
Okay.
But then my opportunity opened up back in Boston. I think at that point in my life, I'd gone to college in New Orleans. I'd been away from Boston for about 8 years at that point, so it was time to come back.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. So now you're back in Boston, and you have your own consulting firm. Can I call it that? Yes.
Sure, yeah.
And so can you just describe to me what you're doing now and how it ties back to Japan?
So my full-time role was furloughed. My whole team was.
Wow.
This was actually a cool opportunity to try something new, start something on the side.
Yeah.
And I'd been doing freelance work related to Japan since I came back to the U.S. I've been doing a lot of jet work related to the jet program.
Oh, great.
So this was a chance to make it more formal and create a project where stakeholders were a lot more limited. So when you work for any university, it's not just the teachers and the students. It's there's admin, there's the parents, there's the government. There's so many what can get accreditation, what can count as a class and what can't. Where something like consulting, if you're happy and your client's happy, that's it.
That's it. That's
so super simple, and
great.
That's something I was hungry for. And I've been happy with the results so far.
Wonderful.
So there's two sides to it.
Okay.
There's the introducing U.S. to Japanese and then introducing Japan to the U.S.
Great. Okay.
And essentially what the pitch is I help individuals and companies build a deeper, more effective relationship with Japan. So what that means for the Japanese side is, I had like 8 a.m. Class I do every Wednesday with a group of employees at a Japanese pharmaceutical firm who will probably be sent to the U.S. at some point, or we'll do a lot of calls in English. And it's not really an English class or anything like that. We talk a lot about more the culture and what the U.S. English speaker expects to see in a presentation. So we're actually starting today. Our next unit is all on how to give effective presentations in English.
Oh, wow.
And we get into how, for example, if you're asked a question, it's changing. But traditionally, if you're asked a question in a Japanese presentation, it means you missed something.
Oh,
It means where in the U.S., as you know, we sort of give a broad overview and we expect people to ask questions about things they want to learn more about. So the result of that is Japanese presentations tend to be very, very text heavy.
Right.
And just go on any website, like go on Yahoo Japan and compare that to like Apple's US website or something like that. And that's not anything on the Japanese presentation style. That's what works in Japan, and it doesn't necessarily work in US. So that's a key thing of what I do there on top of all the culture stuff. So I was doing this project actually through my full-time job with Japan Airlines. And they don't maintain a full-time staff in Boston because there's only one direct flight a day. So they actually contract with British Airways.
Got it,
so one thing the Japanese staff would tell me is they don't know what Americans don't know about Japan, about Japanese hospitality. So someone who's researched, studied, experienced, moving to Japan, living in Japan, and sort of learning those things step by step, that's sort of like what I offered. Something I experienced working with a Japanese company is a mistake was made. Not a big deal, but a mistake was made, so at the end of day meeting, everyone had to watch a video about the proper way to do it. I think from the U.S. perspective, for a lot of people that might feel rigid or mechanical, like the way that's, there's only one way of doing this, but in a lot of industries it works. You know, you have the morning meeting, just put everyone on the same page, the process, and at the end of the day review the process. How did it go? What went good? What went bad?
But now when you were talking about people asking questions, I mean during meetings as well, I mean how was the productivity working in a Japanese workplace? If asking questions is not quite acceptable as it is in the United States, if you had like any issues or you had any questions, how did you approach that?
When you take into account the amount of hours the average Japanese company worker works, actually it's much less productive in Japan per hour.
Wow. Okay. What is the what is the expected hour per week or per day?
It varies by industry, and
okay.
it's changing, but 60, 70, 80 hours is not unheard of.
Wow. Okay.
So, and a lot of it's not allowed legally, but it's sort of the way things have always been done. I think there is this mentality that sort of the economic miracle in post-war Japan was really due to that, really people giving it their all.
Right.
Classic example is paternity leave. It's really tough to get new fathers to take paternity leave, even if it's given to them. Because there's this like mentality that like I'm the father, I need to provide. Again, the younger generation, it's changing, but Japan's a weird case. It can have this reputation of change coming very slow.
Yeah.
But sometimes if you blink, change comes very, very fast. A country I often compare it to is Sweden, because Sweden is it's usually labeled a collectivist society as well. You also have this mentality that if you're non-Swedish in Sweden, like you're not going to become Swedish maybe. Yeah. So it's maybe similar to Japan, even taking shoes off when you go, so like that level of
right.
You can draw, I'm not saying it's the same, but you can draw some parallels.
Yeah.
The main difference is Sweden, in my experience, is very output driven, where Japan is extremely input driven. So if you put in a ton of hours and then you make a mistake, it's like, well, they really showed that they cared.
Right.
Where Sweden's, again, I don't know what it is like for doctors and things like that,
right.
but for like generic office work, it's very 9 to 5.
Okay.
But it's hyper efficient at 9 to 5. Japan to U.S. side, like introducing the U.S. to Japan,
right?
I'm pretty happy where that is, and like I'd probably just grow that and those resources. What I'd love to focus on more is working with more folks from the U.S. to introduce them to Japan. And one of my big passions is travel.
Yeah.
So really, it's kind of I don't think it's an odd influence, but one of my favorite discoveries during quarantine, which I never watched, was Queer Eye.
Queer Eye,
which
really?
I never watched,
yeah.
And they did 4 episodes in Japan.
That's right, they did.
Yes,
That's true.
And something that I is just contagious to me is like the enthusiasm, building people up. So
yeah, I love that.
I'm a big fan of looking at 10 or 20 role models and then taking what I like from each. It's how I built my website. It's like, I like that font. Oh, I like that, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So really building these positive relationships with Japan, and I haven't focused on the travel just because people can't travel, but that's something I'd like to do a lot more with.
Yeah.
Right now, everything I'm offering is group sessions, single sessions, so I'd like to also go more into more like asynchronous, whether it's videos, written stuff, because some people prefer to, it's like, I want to watch that on my own time, I want to be able to rewind, or some people like that live. So there's 2 audiences that really overlap that I want to make sure I can, and also just, I am a solopreneur, so time is limited, and to be able to accommodate folks in different time zones, and maybe there's like this one peak time where 5 people want a meeting and that sort of thing. Something I will say is the entrepreneurship scene in Japan, especially in the last 5 years, is exploding.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Exploding. So you have things like SoftBank. Well, the one that got the most attention was SoftBank's ill-fated investment in WeWork.
Yeah, I saw that documentary about WeWork.
But there's a lot of good investment happening.
Sure.
So we sort of read in textbooks about, Japan, there's this concept of lifetime employment. You work with this one company forever. Yeah, that's still sort of there. But there's also more like techie startup stuff happening.
Yeah, that's great.
In Tokyo, in Osaka, in Nagoya, in Fukuoka is a big one. And Kyushu. And yeah, I just hope that folks reach out to me if they have any questions at all about. If it's a question about Japan, either I'll be able to answer it or I'll be able to point you to someone who can. So.
That's great. Cool. Well, thank you so much again. This was really fun.
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions about Japan, I will be putting Dan's link below, and you can get in touch with him. But thank you so much for joining us today, and hope to see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.